and making arrangements for transportation for the monkeys that I have been left with. But now every monkey you catch, I'll give you $50. And I'm leaving my assistant here. You can come and give the monkeys to him. So after 2 days of trying, the villagers are just not able to find any monkeys. They come back to this man's assistant and said, look, we can't find any. So this guy says, look, I can do one thing. I will release all the monkeys. You give me 35 rupees. You can catch them, bring them back, and take your $50. The villagers are very happy. Okay, so they go back home, take out all the money they have been saving or they had been earned. They come back and give the money to him, and this guy gives the monkeys to them. And then this man, assistant, also goes away, and both of them are never seen again. And what do we see everywhere? Only monkeys. So this is commodity trading. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Firstly, thank you to the organizers for inviting me, according me this opportunity to make a short presentation on what I consider, or rather we consider, as a very important origin for pulses, Africa. Production varieties, the African production varieties mainly that are relevant for India are tur, which is pigeon peas, yellow grams, which is predominantly desi chickpeas for Africa. We don't really have kabulis, green mung beans, and small quantities of udad. All of these above are primarily grown in Africa for export and mainly to India, to a lesser extent Pakistan, and once in a while Bangladesh. Africa does have other varieties. It has edible beans and cowpeas, but these are normally for local consumption and perhaps a little bit for aid agency, food aid demand. We shall go country-wise. Tanzania, one of the most important producers. Last year, the exports for 2011, tur was 70,000 tons was exported out of Tanzania. Yellow grams about 40,000 tons. Mung, 40,000 tons also. There was cowpeas and edible beans, 150,000 tons, but this was consumed locally and within the region. Tanzania has a huge potential to increase this number. This 70,000 tons of tur, mung and yellow grams, 40,000 each, could increase substantially. Tanzania has huge land resources. We only plant about 15% of our arable land in Tanzania. So look out for Tanzania. There will be huge, huge increases in production in Tanzania. The processing capacity for pulses in Tanzania is 30,000 tons for tur, and yellow grams are 20,000 tons. 90% of this processing capacity is owned by ETG Group. Kenya, the production of Kenya last year was a humble 15,000 tons for tur, mung was 15,000 tons, and chana was 5,000 tons. Typically, production is a bit higher than this, probably as much as twice as high as this, but in 2011, there was a drought in Kenya and production was very low. In terms of future potential for Kenya, I think not so much, because Kenya has limited land resources. 70% of Kenya is semi-desert, and horticulture, floriculture, and cash crops like tea and coffee compete with pulses. So I think going ahead, Kenya may not be as important an origin as other countries in Africa. Mozambique, 2011 production was 60,000 metric tons for tur. Mung was 30,000 tons. The cowpeas and edible beans really relevant for the Indian market because they're consumed locally is about 70,000 tons. Huge potential exists. Mozambique has, like Tanzania, huge land resources, a huge coastline, which means there's numerous ports where Mozambique, I beg your pardon, could export from. Processing capacity, there's a processing capacity of 25,000 tons of tur, which is owned by ETG. Malawi, although a small country, Malawi has a production and exports of about 90,000 tons of tur. There isn't any chana or urad or mung. There's some cowpeas and edible beans, about 120,000 tons, but this is primarily for local consumption. Although Malawi is a small country, a lot of effort is going into improving agriculture in Malawi. Under the leadership of President Bingu wa Mutharika, Malawi has become self-sufficient for maize. Malawi used to be an importer of maize. Now Malawi is not only self-sufficient, but also an exporter of maize. A lot of emphasis is being placed on agriculture there, and I think we could see pigeon peas volumes increasing substantially. Processing capacity-wise, there's 50,000 tons processing capacity, of which 40,000 tons is ETG. Ethiopia produces 300,000 tons of chickpeas, but they are huge consumers themselves. It is part of their nutritional habits to eat chickpeas, so they only export 30, 40, 50. Last year was about 60,000 tons that was exported to various destinations, not only India, some was regional exports. Lentils, there's about 80,000 tons being produced. 30,000 tons is exported mainly to neighboring countries. In terms of future potential, Ethiopia is a big country, lots of possibilities. There could be huge commercial farming coming up in Ethiopia, and I think it's something to look out for. Production could increase substantially, but also local consumption could also increase, and exports may not increase as much as the production will increase. In terms of processing, ETG has just set up a 10,000 metric ton lentil processing plant. This brings me to a very important part of the African pulses story: processing. Value addition is a natural transition. Why should Africa export raw pulses when value can be enhanced by processing locally? I think processing is going to become a huge reality in Africa, and a lot of the increased production of pulses will go into processing. As ETG, our processing capacity in 2013 in East Africa will exceed 200,000 tons. The last 3 years, exports of pulses from Africa are shown by this chart. It's all put in one chart, tur, mung, and chana, but if you just look at the way the graph heads, it's all headed north. Chickpeas, mung, and tur are all, production of all these is increasing substantially. As far as India is concerned, East Africa is a very important origin. Why? Firstly, the crop comes out in July, August, which is a time when India needs it the most. This is, in terms of harvesting, this is India's lean period. In terms of consumption, it's just before the festive season, so consumption is extremely high for the Diwali, the Cheuda, and all the rest. Another reason is Africa has a close proximity, very short transit times, 10 to 15 days, which means there's a shorter exposure to commercial risks in terms of price volatility. Also, shorter transit times means shorter financing periods, as the goods can be converted to cash relatively quickly. You don't have to wait for the vessel for 30 or 45 days. The quality is increasingly accepted. Millers are acknowledging that outturns are very attractive. Appearance-wise, perhaps the African pulses, especially the tur, may not look as attractive as Myanmar, but milling outturns, when you mill it, the dal is perfect, and the milling outturns are extremely attractive. African quantities are increasing, and it's a dependable source of supply. It's because of the diverse weather patterns in Africa, it is unlikely that Africa will have, okay, it could have a drought, but a drought could be in Ethiopia and it doesn't affect Tanzania, Mozambique, Malawi, or the other way around. So there's a diverse weather pattern across this region. So Africa is a consistent, will be a consistent producer of pulses. Looking ahead, of course, speaker after speaker has said consumption of pulses is increasing rapidly. Populations are growing. Populations are becoming more affluent. People are eating more food. People are wasting more food. A change in dietary habits. People are preferring healthier vegetarian diets. Pulses is an integral part of vegetarian diets. More pulses are being consumed. And to add to this, and ask the question, where is this food need, where is this increased pulses need going to come from? There's hardly any farming land left in Europe and the Americas. In the East, industrialization is displacing farming land, so it's very difficult for acreage to increase else in the world. So who will meet these needs? Answer is pretty simple. Africa will meet these needs going forward. A scenario on Africa's land. Now here, this slide just addresses Africa's rain-fed arable land. 25% of the world's arable rain-fed land is in Africa, and we are only using 40% of this land. In addition to this, Africa has huge water resources, and there could be a potential to convert much of the semi-arid land by way of irrigation into production of pulses and food. Huge investment is going into empowering Africa's smallholder farmers. NGOs are coming in, aid programs, you have the Gates Foundation, you have all sorts of institutions coming, working with the smallholder farmers, private enterprise like ETG, we work with smallholder farmers to increase their production, to empower them to produce more. Microfinance is becoming a reality in Africa, and in short, I think African agriculture is set to grow at quite a rapid pace in the next few years. As far as pulses will go, as far as pulses goes, it's safe to say that African pulses exports will at least double, at the very least, in this decade. In conclusion, I wish to leave you with this thought that as far as TUV, at least TUV is concerned, Africa will become the largest supplier of TUV to India already in this decade. And again, I repeat what our chairman, Mr. Mahesh Patel, said yesterday, still within our lifetimes, Africa will become the food basket of the world. Thank you.
Yes, friends, I'm back, this time to speak about India as an origin and as a market. Okay, I have only 4 slides to show. I'll start the first slide. I'll actually skip a couple of them and go to the minimum support price. This is a slide which shows the level of importance, high level of importance the government of India attaches to support farmers with higher incomes. Look at the numbers. Over the last 3 years, or in 2 quick years, minimum support price for PGNP and each one of the pulse categories has gone up between 33% and 50%. On PGNP, minimum support price in 2 years has gone up by 50%. Same with gram, which is chana, 50% increase. Same with masoor. And then as far as moong and black gram are concerned, it's by a third, 33%. These are very significant increases, significant hikes in minimum support price, which the government guarantees the farmer. And therefore, the farmer has a lot more confidence to grow these crops. And the effect of these sharp hike in minimum support price is very clearly seen in the production numbers, which of course I will show. And therefore, first proposition, sharp increase in minimum support price by the government of India, which demonstrates clearly the intent of the government to support farmers and ensure that they get much better returns. This also suggests that the terms of trade in India are actually moving in favor of domestic agriculture. Over the last several years, probably a decade, the terms of trade were not in favor of agriculture. They were in favor of the industrial sector and the services sector. But in the last 2 years, I suspect there's a very conscious decision within the government of India to slightly change the terms of trade and bring greater focus and attention on the agriculture sector. And one of the factors which is driving that is a sharp hike in minimum support price. Therefore, this is the first point, an increase in MSP between 33 and 50% on various pulses. Let's look at the demand and supply equation, and let's come to the supply side. We can see very clearly the acreage numbers have increased from 23.3 million hectares in 2009-10 to about 26 million hectares. And then, of course, there's a marginal decline to 25.2 million tons in the current year, which is 2011-12. The output, the government numbers, were actually stagnating. Pulses output was stagnating between 14 and 15 million tons over the last several years. But thanks to a sharp hike in minimum support price in 2010-11, there was a quantum jump in acreage and a quantum jump in production. Therefore, from 14.7 million tons in 2009-10, we find a big jump to 18.2 million tons in production of various pulses in India. And that also tells on the number as far as imports are concerned. And therefore, you can see, while in 2009-10 we had 15 million tons of production, our import was 3.7 million tons. And the following year, with a big jump in production, our imports have actually declined to 2.8 million tons. Current year, 2011-12, and the Rabi harvest, or the second harvest, is now taking place. The acreage is 25.2 million hectares. Production, the latest estimate is 17.3 million tons. 17.3 million tons is about close to 1 million tons less than it was last year. But yet, remember, this is the second highest on record. And it's very important for us to remember that this is the second highest on record. There has been a significant improvement, although slightly lower than last year. Therefore, imports have been taking place, imports are taking place, and my estimate, a good judgment estimate of import for 2011-12 financial year is about 2.7 million tons. Until about December, the total imports were about 2.4 million tons, and my sense is that the first quarter, Jan, Feb, March, it will be about 400,000 tons, taking it to between 2.7 and 2.8 million tons for the current year, which is the financial year, April to March. I have ignored consciously both carry in and carry out. I have assumed a seed, I think we'll come to the demand side, which is very clearly the seed. I have assumed 20 kilograms per hectare, although there could be a small variation in some crops. The farmers tend to use about 25 kilograms of seeds, but on an average, for most pulses, the seed rate is about 20 kilograms. We also have to take into account production losses, the shelling losses or milling losses, which I have assumed at 20% on an average. These calculations usually don't go into the demand supply estimates prepared by Government of India or any other research agencies. This is something very critical, because what the consumer eats is the dal, the milled dal, and there is a certain processing loss. And that processing loss has to be factored in. It actually, so much quantity disappears from the market in terms of processing loss. We also have very small quantum of export, which in the last 2 years has been about 200,000 tons. That leaves dal available as food this year at about 15.2 million tons, vis-a-vis last year's 16 million tons. And the previous year, it was 14.1 million tons. Therefore, you can see that India has broken the 14-15 million tons barrier. We have now gone to a higher level of between 17 and 18 million tons in terms of total production, and in terms of actual consumption of dal, the milled dal, I think we are in the level of now 15 to 16 million tons of consumption of dal. And this is on the demand side. And therefore, there is a certain balance between the demand and supply. And I have also to mention that irrigated area under pulses is between 15 and 16%. There is an opportunity to expand the irrigated area under pulses. Pulses are grown in India under small and marginal farming conditions. And the farmers tend to use inadequate amounts of inputs, whether it is seeds or fertilizers or agrochemicals or even water for that matter. So there is an opportunity for us to strengthen the input delivery system, and if we are able to induce the farmer through price and other incentives to improve the levels of input usage, I'm sure yields are going to improve over the next few years. I'll stay here with the demand and supply, and then go on to an important slide which I think will be of interest to this audience. So I've said earlier, 14.1 million tons was the total dal consumption in India in 2009-10, which substantially improved to 16 million tons in 2010-11, and marginal decline at 15.2 million tons in 2011-12. The population numbers are given. India's population is growing at about 1.6 or 1.7% a year. We add to ourselves about 16 to 17 million year after year. For the current year, the population is estimated at 1.2 billion or 1,200 million. For if the per capita availability of pulses, therefore, comes to about 12.7 kilograms per person per year. It was 12 kilograms 2 years ago, improved to 13.5 kilograms last year. Marginal decline, of course, to 12.7 kilograms. These numbers are certainly not flattering, very simply because nutritionists recommend, Mr. Chairman, nutritionists recommend 20 kilograms per capita consumption. And Indian population is predominantly vegetarian. Pulses are the major source of vegetable protein available in India. Milk is expensive, eggs are expensive, meat is expensive. Pulses, legumes are a great source of vegetable protein, and there's a great need to augment pulses production and deliver pulses at more affordable prices to consumers who are in significant numbers nutritionally challenged. The second point I want to make is volatile prices. Our prices have been volatile in the last 2 or 3 years. There's a strong need to contain volatility in the market. Some of the speakers also mentioned in the morning about need to curb volatility in prices, simply because inflation, food inflation, and volatile prices hurt poor consumers in particular. That brings me to my last point for the day, which is that we as a nation, and I'm happy representatives of the ministry, the government of India are here. We need to ensure nutrition security for this country. We need to ensure that pulses are available to everyone at very, very affordable prices. And one way to deliver pulses to the vulnerable sections of the population is by including pulses under the public distribution system. The central government, the federal government, the government of India supplies rice, wheat, and sugar under the public distribution system. I believe there's a great opportunity, great need to include pulses also under the public distribution system. Sugar is much less of an essential commodity. Pulses are really an essential commodity for this country, and therefore, inclusion of pulses will help deliver protein to people, vegetable protein to people. And therefore, my request, and I want to use this platform to make out a case for the government to procure pulses and supply them through the public distribution system for the poor people of this country. The second point is the skew in consumption. In terms of incomes, the top 30% of the population gets to consume about between 20 and 25 kilograms per capita. And the bottom 30% of the population, the financially challenged, if I may say, actually consumes much less than 10 kilograms per capita. And it is that section of the population which suffers from pervasive malnutrition and undernutrition. And it is that section of the population which deserves to be given, to be actually delivered vegetable protein, and pulses are certainly a great source of vegetable protein. And I hope the government officials sitting here will take note of this, and we will have to make sure that that we don't anymore remain protein deficient, and people who can't afford pulses today are given access to pulses at more affordable prices. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Plant quarantine is a subject which is treated as a kind of barrier, I know, and all of you have a lot of issues. I'll just give a brief overview of our organization and the plant quarantine requirements, and then we will take questions. Very briefly, this department is part of Ministry of Agriculture, and within ministry, from policy angle, Joint Secretary Plant Protection is the administrative head. He is designated as National Plant Protection Organization head. Then he is supported by director, that's me, and both of us sit in Krishi Bhavan, and we are basically policy people. From technical side, the department is headed by a plant protection advisor. They sit in Faridabad, and PPA is supported by Joint Director Plant Quarantine. Scheme in charge, Dr. D.D.K. Sharma is here with us. In case you have any technical issues, he will handle. Then there are people at Deputy Director and Assistant Director level in charge of regional stations and plant quarantine stations. This just gives a kind of sketch of our stations present at different locations. In all, we have 36 plant quarantine stations. 11 are at international airports, 13 are at seaports, and 12 at land frontiers. The main mandate of a plant quarantine organization is to prevent introduction and spread of new pests into India. And second important function is to certify as per IPPC standards to issue phytosanitary certificate for our exports. The main legal framework that we have is Destructive Insect and Pest Act 1914. This is being amended. We are in the process to come up with a Biosecurity Act, and we are in advanced stage of bringing that law into force. And under that, we have issued Plant Quarantine Regulation of Import into India Order 2003. This is the order that regulates all imports of agricultural goods into India. You might have come across this on our website. Details are there. And next important function of our organization is to conduct pest risk analysis. Before allowing any import into India, we conduct detailed pest risk analysis. And next important function is to conduct survey for pests of quarantine significance, their control and their containment. A little bit details of Plant Quarantine Order 2003. This order is 2003, but it's amended almost every year, twice, thrice, after new requirements for plant products are introduced. This order is amended, and but its name is Plant Quarantine Order 2003, its title basically. It has 7 chapters, 12 schedules, 22 plant quarantine forms, and import of all agricultural products are restricted, regulated under Schedule 5, Schedule 6, Schedule 7, based on pest risk analysis. Schedule 5 has 17 entries. This gives a list of all plant products which are prohibited for entry into India. Schedule 6 has 686 entries. It gives a list of all those plants which are allowed to be imported with certain regulations, with import permit and all. Next is Schedule 7. It has 290 entries. For import of commodities listed in Schedule 7, no import permit is required. And next is PSC from country of origin is a must for any import into India. And import of pulses I'll discuss about it in a little detail next. This just gives, the fee structure for allowing import into India. For pulses, it is 2,500 per ton plus 50 for rupees per additional ton. It's small if you compare with other grains, it is a little less than that. For pulses, the exporting country has to issue phytosanitary certificate for each of the consignment. And PPO of the exporting country has to give additional declaration and comply with special conditions of import and endorse these on phytosanitary certificate. Additional declaration pertains to freedom of the commodity from pests. We give the list of pests which are of quarantine concern to India, and the country has to certify that the consignment is free from those pests. That is called additional declaration. And then certain treatments are to be carried out before sending consignment to India. That is covered under special conditions. And the special conditions, treatments mentioned under special conditions are also to be endorsed on PSC. There is one general condition. There is a lot of confusion about this. There is general condition as per section 312. No consignment of food grains is permitted to import with contamination of quarantine weeds listed in Schedule 8 of the PQ order. It leads to a lot of confusion. So I want to clarify this thing that all the weeds which are listed in Schedule 8, we need freedom from those weeds also. And this is a general condition for all food grains that includes pulses also. Specific commodity-wise requirements, like for import of peas, list of pests is given here, A, B, C, D. These are the list of pests here. So the exporting country has to certify freedom from these pests as additional declaration, and special treatment is fumigation with methyl bromide. Commodity can be imported from any country. For chickpea, again, this can be imported from any country. Additional declaration, no pest is prescribed, but under special conditions, fumigation with methyl bromide is prescribed. For pigeon pea, it's basically country-wise. For each country, there is a different list of pests. Those special conditions of import are same for all. We need freedom from soil as well as fumigation with methyl bromide. Process of phytosanitary inspection and release of consignments. Now we have put everything online. One can apply online for issue of import permit as well as for release of consignments after coming to India. And there's some general conditions mentioned here. The documents like original import permit has to be there, original phytosanitary certificate has to be there, bill of entry, certificate of origin, bill of lading, invoice, etc. These are checked before allowing imports. After scrutiny of papers, inspector is deputed for drying samples, and there is a procedure for drying samples. I need not give details of this. Anyway. Some countries have been given special derogation with regard to fumigation at the port of exit. In fact, the ideal condition is, the prescribed condition is to fumigate before exporting to India. The country of origin has to certify alongside the freedom from pest, the fumigation also. So MBR fumigation has to be carried out at the port of exit. But certain countries have been given derogation, USA, Canada, and France, keeping in view the special conditions there because of the ambient temperature doesn't permit fumigation with methyl bromide, and keeping that in view after detailed discussion between countries, this special derogation has been given to these three countries. Pulses imported from other countries without fumigation are treated in the relaxation provision. Relaxation provision is under PQ order and says that whenever relaxation is allowed, 5 tons fee is to be charged. Last year, we took a decision to allow fumigation at the port of arrival in such cases where countries of export and PPOs are not certifying fumigation with methyl bromide. Moreover, one more thing I want to clarify, that for relaxation cases, plant quarantine stations are not authorized basically. they have to refer their cases to ministry, and it is Joint Secretary NPPO who is authorized to grant relaxation. But last year, since a large number of consignments are coming without meeting or import requirement, we took a decision to allow our plant quarantine stations to release consignments after charging 5 tons fee and after fumigating. But that was a big decision. That was not an ideal situation. This decision was taken under a lot of duress. Yeah, about this I don't want to say. Mr. Chandrasekhar covered production, export, import and all, so I don't want to spend time on this. There are some issues of concern for us, like non-endorsement of additional declaration. We get PSCs without endorsement of special additional declaration. We get PSCs with non-endorsement of special conditions of import permit, like freedom from weed seed. It's missing in most of the PSCs, freedom from soil, not certified. And whenever there is a non-fulfillment, whether it is additional declaration missing, that is also treated as non-compliance. Non-endorsement of special conditions is also treated as non-compliance. If you don't certify freedom from weed seed, that is also taken as non-compliance. Freedom from soil, if not mentioned, that is also treated as non-compliance. Non-endorsement of IP number on PSC. Again, if it is not given, then it is treated as a non-compliance. Improper fumigation, like fumigation with non-prescribed chemical. Aluminum phosphide has not been found to be effective against pests of quarantine concern to India, and that is why fumigation with any other chemical, I mean phosphine or any other chemical, is not as per our requirements and treated as not in compliance with our requirements. Insufficient dose of fumigation, insufficient duration of treatment, these are also there. Thank you very much.
Good morning for everybody. It's okay? Ready? Okay. So good morning again. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Praveen Dongre for the invitation, all the Indian colleagues, all my colleagues. I will give you a brief outlook for South America. South America is a continent situated in the Western Hemisphere, mostly in the Southern Hemisphere. The continent is